Hello and welcome to What the Lux with me, Fred Moore.
And me, Anant Sharma.
Together we lead Matchreform, a design consultancy specialising in brand, digital experience and content. And this is a podcast that calls time on tired ideas of luxury.
Alongside industry luminaries and thought leaders, we explore what truly defines category-leading products and services. Today on What the Lux, we're joined by the world's most fascinating man in psychology and design, in my opinion at least, Professor Charles Spence. Charles is Professor of Experimental Psychology at Oxford University and head of the Crossmodal Research Laboratory, where he leads pioneering research into how our senses interact. He's published more than 1,200 papers, won multiple awards, and collaborated with everyone from Michelin-starred chefs like Heston Blumenthal to Toyota, Diageo, and some of the world's most iconic luxury brands. His experiments have become modern legends, proving that Pringles taste fresher when they crunch differently, that mousse tastes sweeter on a white plate than a black one, and that heavier cutlery makes food feel more luxurious. His books, Gastrophysics and Sense Hacking, have changed how we think about food well-being and just our everyday, day-to-day experience. At the heart of his work is a radical but deceptively simple idea. Luxury is not just about what we see or buy, but how we sense things. Sound, touch, taste, smell, sight, how they come together to shape meaning, memory and value, all things that are so close to our heart as well at Matchreform. Charles, welcome to What the Lux.
You've done your research.
Of course. Look, you've dedicated your career to studying multisensory perception, let's call it that. How do you get interested in it?
I was here in Oxford in the 80s. Well, by accident. The whole career is an accident and a coincidence and such like.
Whose isn't?
Yes, but I had I was more interested as an undergraduate, playing sport and drinking in the bar, and I had to do a project, and got sent at the last minute to a guy upstairs who happened to be a DJ here in town, and had a broken TV in his apartment, or flat as we used to call them in those days, and there was a strange perceptual experience going on at the start of movies when you put the VHS in, and they have the sort of the theme music coming from the speakers in his DJ kit, and that will be fine. And then after the credits rolled, the first character starts speaking on screen. There was this like immediate disconnect because the voices were coming from the speakers wherever they were, and the lips were moving over there. And then a few seconds later, your brain would just fuse it all together. And so my first experiments in 1988, 89 were sort of breaking TVs and moving the sounds around to see what the limits were on our ability to hear and see at the same time. And ever since, I've just been sort of adding senses, always, I think for me, maybe uniquely with application in mind.
So you were kind of drawn to it because you were interested in how displays sound normalized.
Yeah, you could put it, or it's a sort of ventriloquist dummy, we might call it. Our brain sort of puts things together, glues the senses together, hearing and vision, and how most of modern technology is mostly audio-visual, and it's very good at isolating sources. So my work's been around sort of interface design for car drivers for BMW and Toyota over the years, and there the technology, your mobile phone can speak from one location, but you're meant to be looking out of the window screen in a different location, and our brains didn't evolve for that. They evolved to focus on one location or another. And so how do you identify the limits on what we can do across the senses and then resolve it through better design, in that case of technology? But over the years, just moved from that space into environment design, paint colours that make people more productive or help them to sleep better, and then from there into food and drink, getting along that way. I suppose for the first 15 years or so working with the car companies, always hoping you get the dream result. This would make the perfect warning signal that would cut road collisions by X%, and even if you got the dream result, which rarely happened, then it would still take 20 years for that dream result to go anywhere, to end up in a car that you could buy on the high street, by which time it'll all be driverless cars anyways. You take the driver out of the equation.
Can I ask a question? Because obviously, to your point earlier, the more kind of technology enabled we're becoming and the more immersive and, the more we're taken away from reality by technology and delighted by technology, or the more we're put into synthetic environments, that seek to emulate the physical experience we have. Presumably that presents, sort of takes you back to your beginnings, presents quite a fascinating gap between, how do you bridge this difference between what your body is actually feeling, but what your brain is telling your body it ought to feel?
In a way, I mean, initially it was all around sort of spatial location and how we could only concentrate on one location across all the senses at once. We couldn't divide our attention. I guess now it sort of comes back in the sense of I'm very interested in sort of biophilic design, be it in restaurants and hospitality, or sort of digital recreation of biophilic blues and greens of nature and bird song, and even whether aromatherapy might in fact be kind of the olfactory nature effect. And why is it that one of my favourite facts that came out of sense hacking was that across North America, in homes from Texas, if that's the hottest state, to Alaska, which might be the coldest, people set their indoor home environment to a temperature and humidity level with their aircon that matches any one place best on Earth, and that's the Ethiopian highlands where maybe we evolved. And so it's like this, we are searching out and feel most comfortable in those environments that link back to our evolutionary history, perhaps. And so again, it's these sort of these constraints that we've inherited or evolved with, identifying them and then thinking how we can design better for those inherent constraints on the senses.
The biophilia thing's interesting. I think it might have been in your book an experiment, or just certainly data that showed that prisoners facing green spaces had less health problems.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I've been thinking about it very much these last couple of weeks because we've just moved into our entirely new £500 million building. So the last one was closed down with asbestos 8 years ago. And the first, they tried to put lots of us professors in windowless rooms, which also in the book it says is very bad. And then I complained, gave them a health condition, and they put me in a room with a window, but facing a brick wall. So I think, other psychologists ought to be able to do it better, you think. But yeah, I definitely believe that. And the more research that comes out, the benefits of exposure to nature are stronger and stronger. And that's something that I kind of did a precursor to sense hacking in 2001 for ICI and Quest and sort of paint company and a fragrance company who were speaking to all customer senses. They had textures, they had paints, they had fragrances, they had flavours, but each of their divisions was kind of segregated. And I did a Secrets of the Senses report for them in 2003. And in that, this kind of notion of biophilia was just beginning, really. Well, it had been around for 2 decades, but the research, no one could really believe that just going out for a walk for 10, 15 minutes into nature could have such dramatic effects on improving mental well-being and performance and so on.
What are the effects?
Certainly enhanced well-being. So maybe a recharging of your mental resources, some would say, and maybe a change in mental outlook through connection to nature. Certainly an increase in relaxation. We did a study with Southwest Trains last year. We got a train and went around London on the commuter route for an hour at lunchtime with 3 groups of commuters, and had them either listening to their favourite podcast, nature soundscapes, or just sitting there quietly. And just to see the beneficial effect of those who are listening to the nature soundscape with a beatific smile on their face, kind of relaxed, smiling, taken somewhere else. And you could just see, you didn't really need to measure the response scales to see what beneficial effect it was having. And definitely beneficial when it's the real thing. But for me, I sort of wonder about, it seems that digital nature does, or plastic nature does just as well. And for me, a very intriguing paper from, I think, the 70s, titled something like, does a plastic palm work as well as good as the real thing? To which the answer seems to be yes. At least for half a century ago, yes. I can't quite believe it's true, but it was in the world's top science journal, Science. And other things since would say that, even the screensaver on your computer desktop when you turn it on, that's kind of a nature effect. It's clearly digital, and just a few minutes of staring at a nature screensaver will deliver significant benefits. And it's been hard. I think the more senses you engage with, the better. So if it looks like a fragrant tree and it smells like one, then I'd imagine it would be a bigger benefit. But if it's a cheese plant, they don't really smell of much. So all you've got is the visual, and hence the plastic or the digital does just as well. But maybe the more senses you add, the better. And there are very sort of artistic installations now. There's one at the Welcome in London, probably during COVID, where some artists had been and recorded from this forest in Japan where lots of people go to kill themselves. So it's a sort of spooky place, but also had the sound effects and also had a scent release. So it had like 3 senses capturing this immersive nature environment. And the idea being it was run by the Welcome was because that would help recovery of patients, going back to the old idea of sort of little gardens in hospitals that you used to have, wellbeing gardens, and going back to the original study you mentioned about the hospital patients who recovered faster post-surgery if they had a window looking out on nature rather than not.
Do you think in the future there'll be computers or headsets that actually deliver scent and I guess go beyond like basic haptics? Or, I mean, it seems almost silly to like be pumping scent through, or like I didn't even know how that would work in real time.
So it is possible to have a digital control of scent in a VR headset, and they exist, and there are some companies now, I don't know, Feels Real or something, or Feel Well, who have a light display in the headset. They have the sound effects of nature, and they can deliver some scent. I think one of them got banned because it was deemed a vaping product. Those things do exist, but the problem is they only have a very limited range of scents. I think with me, the fundamental challenge is you'll have to buy a refill.
Yeah.
And like for your color printer, all you need is the 3 colors and you can get any color you want. We don't have the equations for smell, which means you'd have to have every single smell you wanted. So who's going to stock every smell? And then worse still, I think we all suffer from this sort of fundamental misattribution error, I call it, which is I could demonstrate in the lab or in the real world that by adding scent to XYZ experience, demonstrably improved your enjoyment, your immersiveness, the memorability. But when I ask you about, let's say I pump the smell of new mown grass when you're watching the World Cup football games, and I'll say, how much did you enjoy the game? And you give a higher ranking with the smell of grass than without, with the extra sensory cue. But when I ask you, well, why did you enjoy the game so much? Well, it was great football. You'll attribute it to your eyes, not to the sense of smell. And until we can get over that, I think there's no one's going to buy the refill because no one attributes their pleasure, their enjoyment to the right sense. Probably because we're hardwired for vision to be dominant. And that's maybe why companies like, I think it was Peugeot, 15 years ago, they started introducing scent consoles into some of their models of cars. And like 4 different scents, but they made sure to give a couple of refills to keep you going for the first while. But after that, I imagine no one will have bothered.
It's quite interesting that like I never really thought about the fact that things objectively smell good or bad, whereas the other senses aren't quite as objective. Nothing objectively sounds bad or good. It's more preference driven, or am I just...
It's often said, and probably true, that smell is a more emotional sense, and that smells are all valence. They're either good or bad. It's hard to think of a neutral smell in the way a neutral shape is. A triangle is good or bad. Well, but for smells, they are fundamentally valenced, and maybe that's because smell and emotion are so closely connected in the brain from the very earliest stages. It might help to explain.
The desensitization thing is a big issue. I mean, we were working for a Middle Eastern hospitality group, and we were looking at redesigning their rituals, and a part of that was scent. And the issue is that you have to keep changing the scent to jar people back into attention. Otherwise, they simply just switch off to it, which is a big problem,
Although I do remember, one time in New York, and the snow came in, and we got stuck there overnight, and sent to some hotel, and just walking in there, and the sort of smell of luxury, but it sort of stuck with me for the years afterwards. So much so that when I went back during COVID, I wanted to go back to the same hotel, but then that was just like a one-off exposure, and quite what it was that it smelt luxurious, not like whatever Heathrow and Gatwick, where they often have scent machines now, but with this horrible synthetic, artificial, cheap-smelling.
But the acoustics of Heathrow are quite interesting. It's like being in the Twilight Zone, the Heathrow Terminal 5. It's sort of really like there's a sense of I can't explain it, but I spend too much of my life in airports. So, but apparently they spend quite a lot of time working out how to sort of make it feel busy, but sort of it's a background noise, but it's more in the background than most background noise. I don't know. There's some weird.
I'm so obsessed with the smell thing. I can't. Don't get to concentrate on the hearing element.
And we started with now some of our hotel clients, like think what's the sound of a corridor, or like what are the sound of what's the like ambient sound of these like liminal, these spaces in between, and how, given the fact that it's so obvious that you can reshape spaces and make them intimate or less intimate with lighting, how do you also consider not like music, but just like tone? And I don't know, have you looked into that?
Yeah. everything from, you can think of the sound of indicators or closures or openings, and I forget which of the luxury car brands, and they would have the indicator to the left or right. There was a sound of a good old-fashioned carriage clock, sort of engineering the right sort of sound. I've seen others working on flip-top lighters for cigarettes, and again doing psychoacoustic work to figure out just what sound that should have, that flip.
Yeah.
And for us, we work everything from the pop of a bottle or a cork or a can opening. Can that be luxurious or not? The door closing sound clearly is obviously highly engineered, just like the new car smell to sound a certain way.
Well, it impacts pleasure, doesn't it? It's famous, isn't it? If you hear a cork of a wine in the background, it tastes sort of more full-bodied.
It tastes more enjoyable, yes. That's, in fact, one of the experiments we did in 2017 in London with 150 wine writers and critics and a few general public, served them 4 glasses of red wine, 2 with a cork-stoppered bottle. You either heard the pop or actually popped it yourself, and 2 with a screw cap. You either heard the sound of a screw cap and I gave you the wine, and just that sound of the cork-stoppered bottle elevated ratings of the wine's quality and your mood and the appropriateness of this product for a party. Or
But that's not really the sound. That's the association. That's the fact that that screw tops are cheaper wines, and it's a perceived quality anyway.
yes,
wine.
which is what the Australian wine press said when our results came out. How dare you say that? They weren't having none of it, nor the Californians.
But what about the removal of senses? So places like Don Le Noir, where you sort of for those who don't know, it's a restaurant where you're served your food in the darkness and by blind waiters. You sort of go in thinking that you don't know what you're eating. You pick a kind of general theme of a dish. So you're not served steak if you're vegan, for example, but you do come out of it thinking that you've had something that's not what you've had. But the thing is, I went there. I remember this years ago. I went on a date I was sort of looking to jumpstart a bit. It just wasn't going that well. It didn't taste good, actually. The food. It didn't taste good. It doesn't work. You'd think theoretically you'd like to think, oh, by my sense being really focused, until you take away, it's in the dark. But actually, it tastes bad. Felt like I'd had plain food.
Absolutely. And we've done like a few reviews of all the dine in the dark literature and studies and journalist comments. And you can't find anybody in print who says it tastes good. It's an interesting experience. It is experiential dining that is increasingly popular, but it's back to the visual dominance. We eat first with our eyes, and if you take that away, then you're left not knowing is it chicken or fish. So it's kind of an interesting experience. Once in Asia, it's very popular these days, but as a first date venue more than anything else, it's interesting to know that I can't tell if you're listening to me. If we're in a table, you've got a grunt in the dark, the right points, and then I know you're still listening to me, not that very interesting conversation over there, and that sort of fun. But you can tell the temperature of is it red or white wine by the temperature of the glass, hopefully. But no one's doing this at home, and just a one-off sort of gimmicky thing.
What's your favourite experiment?
I think it was a sort of here in Oxford in 2007. It was the Sound of the Sea precursor with Heston Blumenthal, and we've been working together for a few years, and then he came up and we did a science and art festival in Headington Hill at the Science Museum. And the day before, we had 150 people booked in, all paid, and they expected to eat something from the world's best chef and hear a bit of talking. We hadn't really got anything ready. And in that sort of last-minute desperate state, he said, okay, I'll bring up a van full of oysters and some bacon and egg ice cream. And we'll have people eating that oyster, either listening to the sounds of the sea or with farmyard chickens, and then we'll give them a scoop of bacon and egg ice cream that was on the menu at the time, either with the sound of sizzling bacon or farmyard chicken noises. Never thinking it would work, but what else are we going to do with all those people coming? And amazingly, it did work. The oyster tasted better with the sounds of the sea, and we could flip the flavour of the ice cream, making it more bacony with the sizzling bacon sounds, or bring out the eggy notes by playing the eggy sounds. And really surprising it worked, and sort of led then into one of the Sound of the Sea dish the next year comes onto the menu as a signature dish in the world's best restaurant. It's a really nice way in which the kind of the gastronomy and the gastrophysics and the sort of science side can team up with culinary greatness.
If someone was eating an egg but could hear the sound of the sea, or perhaps could hear like the sound of a pig but was eating some mackerel, do you think the mackerel would taste like bacon?
If they were in a dine-in-the-dark restaurant, I imagine it would.
Are there any recent studies that have changed how your field think about things?
Yes, and in a way, I think sort of gastrophysics or the sort of science of the senses on and off the plate has come a long way in the last 20 years since we did our sonic chip experiment in 2004.
What's the sonic chip experiment?
Where we had 20 hungry undergraduates and gave them each 2 tubes of Pringles, 180 each, and had them biting into those Pringles in front of a microphone, and then we would change in real time the sound of the crunch, and we could make those potato chips 15% crunchier, more liked, simply by changing the sound. This became the sonic chip. That won the Ig Nobel Prize, the opposite of what you really want. But anyway, some people get confused. And that sort of started us off in food, really. And since then, we figure out how each sense plays a role and how you can change the colour, change the sound, change the smell in order to enhance the experience. We do it in the food itself, on the plateware, the glass, then in the environment in which people eat and drink. That's all modifying known flavour experience. I can play sweet music, tinkling high-pitched pianos, or wind chimes, and I'll bring out 10% sweetness in your chocolate dessert. But it's still just sweetness. So in the last few years, we sort of switched to it to think, can we take the science of the senses, specifically in gastronomy, and deliver extraordinary experiences, something you've never had before, to take the science beyond the known, and hence why this flavour-changing dish would be great. We've never had a taste in our mouth that changes back and forth. It's one thing or another. It's taken us to a dish we've just been working on with a Milan chef, Federico Rotigni, in Sensorium, his restaurant, and he's got a dish that makes 60% of diners cry or feel like crying. That's an extraordinary response. Some people cry to the sound of the sea as well, but this 60%, that's sort of extraordinary response to what is in fact a rice pudding. So we've been working with him in the restaurant with 100 diners come and have the full experience that has nostalgic sounds. It has, you like this low frequency vibrations, a bit like your gongs, sub 20 hertz, so you can't hear them, but your body feels something.
Yeah, really, that's interesting.
Plus some more rhythmic music. Plus it's at a point in the emotional journey of the meal. It's kind of a Cinderella storyline, I think, which is things get better and they
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah.
just after the dip.
Had that old narrative arc.
Yep. And it's all these things together, I think, create this extraordinary response. And if we take out those low frequency vibrations, far fewer people feel like crying. If we ask the delivery drivers, give them a bowl of rice pudding and say, do you just feel like crying right now? They have no idea what you're talking about. And that's sort of extraordinary. And that then fits in with this idea of flavour changing, awe-inspiring dishes. Could we give you something that's sort of an interesting emotional or extraordinary response, normally to large landscapes or things that are bigger than us? But why can't we have an awe-inspiring dish? Or what would that mean? Or could we have magical food? Put magic in your mouth because you love magic, you love food. But what even would that mean? Or is there something special about the mouth that means, well, I don't want magic in there because magic is what we don't understand. Eating's the most dangerous thing we do. So to have something I don't understand about to be ingested in my body, that's really danger kind of thing going on. And all these are extraordinary responses. ASMR is another one, sort of the neck shiver that people get when you whisper and crinkle paper and stuff like that. We've been doing that with whiskey, trying to successfully inducing ASMR responses as another kind of extraordinary response. And this whole world of what could we do through better understanding of the senses in collaboration with the creatives, which I call the Formula One of the kitchen, these sort of innovative, young or more established chefs or mixologists or perfumiers or chocolatiers.
But there's so much to take from that beyond gastronomy for general customer experience, because I think that's a fascinating example from the Sensorium, to get people to cry by combining narrative arc with suggesting the storyline of emotion, basically. And
a bit of ritual as well,
And a bit of ritual, exactly.
There's like a wafer that's broken in front of the diner over the rice pudding, which is just like a Eucharist wafer. So that's kind of a very ritualistic gesture.
I mean, luxury brands are all about getting people to feel a certain way, perhaps to slow down, perhaps to speed up, perhaps to engage with something in their surroundings, with each other, whatever. And the arc of the whole thing is rarely thought about as a whole. People think about these artifacts in isolation, a nice branded element, what the store looks like, rather than actually the entire, the sequence of things. So the Crossmodal Research Laboratory at Oxford is a leader in sensory design or sensory research. The Crossmodal Research sensory research sounds sexier than crossmodal. They put the blue sky thinkers who are meant to be looking at the future of how we can combine the senses and make us feel differently in a windowless office.
Then upgraded to a window but facing a brick wall.
What's the vision with it all?
No. So this is the whole building. There, half a £1 billion of 3 departments. And so it's we're one small group in the big thing. And in truth, because our building we used to do lots of in-lab research, most of it, till about 2010. And then along came sort of internet-based testing, and that allowed us to do a lot of stuff online and go a bit more global, doing things side by side. And then in 2016 or something, our building was closed down from one day to the next. We were all kicked out. And so kind of without a lab, maybe anyway, sort of shifting more to real-world research, saying, does it really make sense to bring an undergraduate, a weirdo, we call them Western-educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, a student studying psychology into the lab to try and get insights about people in general at a global scale? Probably not. So we do much more of our research really out in the field, in restaurants, in bars, in cafes, and with airlines and or food festivals, music festivals, wherever we can get lots of people, and try and create the sorts of experiences, typically with brands, because I've got no budget for anything. Things like this, the Singleton Sensorium would be another of the favourite experiments from 2013, where we had 500 people in a gunmaker's studio in Soho with a glass of Singleton, a scorecard and a pencil, and took them through 3 rooms, changing the scent. And we had Roger Dove, so pretty fine scent maker, and changing the visuals, changing the shapes, the colours, the textures across the 3 rooms, often using sounds that are sort of semantically meaningful, so creaking wood doors to bring out the texture and mouthfeel and the swallow of the whiskey, and through that create immersive, engaging, multisensory, sort of experiential, yes, but also experimental for us, things that then sort of play out, that those who come through that experience and have it themselves, who are made aware of the impact of the different senses in the way that most of us are normally not, because we don't realise what smell's doing to us. We don't realise why the rosé wine tastes better in Provence than it does on a cold winter's day at home. By sort of making people aware of the impact of these sensory cues, then they go away, I think, the best of them, many of them, some of them, to change what they do in their own business. But just when I spent too many times going to talk to a big US corporation who own a lot of the clothing stores, shall we say, and a lot of the clothing brands, about multisensory design across their retail portfolio. And they sort of nod their heads. Let's talk about the importance of sound and visuals and synchronization and congruency. And what you could do if you had scent into your store, and what are you doing about temperature and humidity? And they keep nodding, and then they go away, and they just get a lighting consultant in and do the lighting as they always did, because they don't. So if the science of the senses doesn't agree with your intuition, like any marketing executive, you go with your gut feel in the end.
Do you get nervous when you're doing these experiments, and do are you sometimes like, God, am I going to prove anything?
Yeah, the first few definitely sleepless nights, and especially when we do experiments with Toyota and we start in the lab very highly controlled or everything, and they say, can you do it on the test track? I think there's so much more going on there and uncontrolled, but time and again things work even better in this real world, more sensorily overloaded situations than they do in a quiet, silent, black testing booth. It's been okay and good. And for the Singleton Sensorium, when we were trying to get the design for it ready, I said, people have got to have a separate glass of whiskey in each room, otherwise they'll know it's the same whiskey. So how can we ask them, about the taste, the smell, the texture 3 times in a row when it will make no sense to them? They'll just say, well, what did I say last time? It's the same whiskey, I'll say the same. So I was really against that, but they said practically we don't have 1,500 whiskey glasses for this. say they have to keep the same glass. So I said, okay, if that's the only way we can do the experiment, we'll do it that way, worried about the thing. And in hindsight, that turns out to be one of the best things about the experiment, was because if I'd given you a different glass in each room, you wouldn't really be quite sure if it was the same whiskey or not. And you attribute your different response to a different glass of whiskey I'd given you. Whereas because it hadn't left your hand, that was the power amongst people as a result. And now, whatever it is, 30 years later, 1,250 papers later, that's a lot of experiments.
That's a lot of papers.
Not all of them are experiments. Some of them are just reviews and commentaries and things. But that's probably a couple of thousand experiments. So by now, it's who cares if the next one does or doesn't work, really.
Do you think it's more effective when these things are invisible to the customer or overt, or does it make any difference?
So maybe it depends who's playing the game, I think. So I suspect for if it's a Michelin-starred chef, then they may be in the business of confronting your senses, of surprising you. You expect the unexpected. If you don't get it, what are you paying all this money for? And when you experience the unexpected, something that looks like this but tastes like that, then you might say that's just really badly made. But now you'll say, well, here I am, this temple to design. It's clearly thought about. Same thing in a design store when you go and you pick up that glass, that jug and that sort of vase that looks like cut glass and it's just made out of plastic. Again, it's a disconnect between the senses, but because of the environment, you say, no, that's really good design and I'm paying for that. But when that translates to the...
We don't need to have anchor, you need a value reference for everything, don't you? And so you just reference it against your environment, I suppose, which is, if I go Heston Blumenthal and I have, fish that tastes like chicken, I think it's genius. Whereas if I get that from Nando's, I'm not buying it,
and that's where you got implications. So then if you try and do that in the high street, so you colour your white wine blue so it stands out on the shelf, you might get visual interest on one purchase, but it's just bad design. Or like the bacon and egg ice cream that we served in the experiment with our sizzling bacon and chicken sounds all those years ago. That was then launched by Waitrose or whoever it was and failed.
The blue wine thing is like, if you're trying to exist in the wine category and that's what you're anchoring your value against, or referencing your value against is the right word to use, it's probably stupid to have blue wine. But if you're creating an entirely new narrative around why it's like organic wines are good, I think, you basically, you allow yourself to build a new model in your mind for how to organize the taste of it when you realize that there's no way you're going to reference it against red or white wine. It's sort of weirdly somewhere in between, and it sort of does taste quite nice, but it doesn't taste nice at all if you try and compare it to either red or white, and then it just tastes unsatisfying.
Yeah. And so I think they're explicitly drawing the customer's attention to a sensory disconnect can work when managed well at the high end of luxury and design. It's more likely to fail if the consumer's attention is brought to a disconnect in mass market products. And then probably I'd see many hospitality chains interested in trying to play some of the same games or tricks or illusions or effects as have been demonstrated by some of these chefs and so on. But they've got no reason to draw their customers' attention to the fact. Yeah. So when with Ferran Adria's Alicia Foundation, we did the study that dessert tastes 11% sweeter on a round white plate than a black angular plate. Yeah. That's of no use to a Michelin-starred restaurant for a once-in-a-lifetime meal. Who cares? Just add more sugar if you want sweeter. But for a sort of a hospitality chain, then or mass food producer, so if we make our plates or our yogurt pots this color, this shape, this texture, and we could make them sweeter, that could have huge implications. But the producer has no reason to tell the consumer why they're doing it. So it's sort of hidden in that sense. Probably my favorite real-world example of that would be in 2012. We had lots of fun doing experiments with chocolate, and we give people milk chocolate or dark chocolate, with the managers of Nestle or whoever, and give them a Booba Kiki scale with a round shape up on one end of the scale and just a star shape at the other end. We say, taste those pieces of chocolate and put a mark on this scale between Booba and round, or is that chocolate you're tasting more Kiki and angular? And you'll find milk chocolate goes to the Booba end, the round end. The darker the chocolate, the closer to the angular Kiki end you get. Everyone will do it. So it's great. And then when we published that in 2011 and 2012, And then we said, okay, if you're a chocolate confectionery producer, then it would make sense, if you want to reduce sugar, to round off your chocolates, because round is sweet. And then you could reduce the sugar and keep the perception in the mind of the consumer the same. So just as sweet as I love it, but with less of the unhealthy stuff. The following year, Cadbury's Dairy Milk rounded off their iconic rectangular Dairy Milk bar without changing the formula. And what did every Daily Mail reader, a lot of Daily Mail readers wrote in, complained, "You've made our chocolate sweeter and creamier." And that's exactly what we said would happen. But you should, sugar's too cheap to reduce it. You have to put something else in its place. And so these things, are there. And others since, people like Roses have altered the shape of their chocolates. They don't want to talk to the consumer about sweetness. Have they changed the formula or not? I don't know, but maybe. But there, these sort of sensory design interventions that were first discovered in the fancy restaurants. We did the first chocolate shape experiment with Heston here in Oxford in 2007. Then can make it to the high street, but it sort of disappears under the radar of, you're just served food that looks like this in this kind of package, and you think it's good tasting food or tastes the same, but it's less of the bad stuff. You have no idea why. But behind the scenes, in the best cases, the neuroscience inspired innovation will be there. And I can't help, when I go to the supermarkets now, even, we did a lot of work back in the day with Unilever, who funded my lab for the first 15 years, on deodorant cans. So we proved the Lynx effect, that young boys are more attractive to young ladies if they smell of Lynx or anything else pleasant, as it happens. And we also looked at the shape of deodorant bottles. A lot of them are not just conical, they have a indentation somewhere. And we showed that when people go to pick up a deodorant bottle or any other bottle with an indentation, their hands will reach towards the narrow point, the affordance point of the packaging. But before their hands get to that affordance point, their eyes lead. So by introducing a narrow point in a package, like a deodorant can, you can create valuable areas of real estate on the packaging where people will be more likely to look, more likely to notice. And then if you go to the supermarket and look at any Unilever brand with an indentation in its deodorant packaging, you'll see that they put the brand name right there at the affordance point. Whereas the other players, Beiersdorf and others, the names are here, it's down there, it's all over the place. So that's there in the marketplace. I can see it because I know what to look for. We did the underpinning research. But to the average consumer, it just completely passes them by. It just seems like it just works, maybe. It's just, it just works, or I just like it.
Can we quickly talk about how can luxury brands help their customers feel better, think about wellness? I'm quite interested in, what are the sensory things that can basically promote well-being?
So I'd say on the one hand is think about congruency between the sensory triggers you deliver. I'm more and more drawn to sort of the biophilic design as a route to wellness, and in part targeting maybe the more emotional senses. So how do you go beyond the sort of the visual and the auditory, and can you create, if you're like the Western hotels with their white tea scent, if you can create the scent of place that people like so much that they want to burn a scented candle in their home, is that some sort of measure of success? And by bringing the senses together in a congruent manner, probably referencing the nature effect, and maybe thinking increasingly about sensory individuality, or what an old researcher, Mallory Wober, used to call sensor types. That maybe we each have different sensory profiles. Then how can you play in that space of delivering a personalized or a customized experience? So is luxury more about that sort of personalization? Not so much about the experience itself, but being able to personalize that experience for your customers. And again, some chefs are doing that. Maybe some of the hotel chains are doing it. Is it everything from, what scent would you like to take to your room tonight? Or can we scent it with your preferred laundry scent? We'll give you whatever your pillow menu, and then thinking what you can do for each sense to offer some degree of customization, both in what the senses deliver and maybe sensitive to this, whatever, neurodiversity and and sort of avoiding sensory overload, or finding places where, like, is it Paley Park in New York, one of the pocket parks in New York, I really like, which is where an old the building was, and now it's just like a city centre park, just one building size. And at the back of it, it has a waterfall, and then greenery on the sides, and just with chairs. And the idea is that nature sound of the waterfall will mask the sounds of the city, and that you can recover some sense of well-being by sitting in this little pocket park. But the seats are there, so you can sort of move them or sit closer or further from the water, depending on your sort of sensory preferences. And so that's probably intuitively designed in, that there's sort of this range of sensory possibilities, and either by giving people the explicit choice, what kind of pillow do you want, soft or hard, or by creating a space where people could just sort of navigate themselves to find the location, the light levels that they prefer. And then there's sometimes, mentioned earlier about what is the sound of luxury. And in some cases, clearly, when I think about, on the whole, telephone lines and aeroplane announcements, tighten your seatbelt, I think what a horrible tinny sound these experiences have. Surely that could be designed better to have a more luxurious sound feel to it. So there are ways to design in luxury in the sound, of everything from the car to the car door to the hotel to the on-call. But sometimes it's also about taking things away, maybe about sort of a luxury hotel. You don't hear people walking down the corridor. You don't hear the other doors closing. You don't hear the disco and so sometimes, luxury is about almost removal of the unwanted.
Well, I think it's about like understanding what the brand promises and then living it consistently across the sensory journey and physical journey. So some brands, the W Hotel is, you expect a level of sort of forthright hedonism. In an Oman resort, you expect a sort of invisible service. I think, you got to know what kind of like quadrant you're catering to. But you've looked at the history of luxury, haven't you?
For the gastronomy space, then it is the sort of the sort of switch between scarcity of the ingredients to the amount is luxurious. 200 plates of food, no one could possibly eat them all. It's just the amount. Doesn't matter what it is. That's the luxury. Through is the sort of serviceware being the thing, and then back again, and then this ingredient coming in and out, and peasant food becoming the luxury. The oysters, or was it the tuna fish that was in the 70s was in cat food because no one wanted to eat it, and now becomes almost fish to extinction. Almost incoherence of the thing, and maybe this is partly what happened at Noma. They have we have a seasonal local menu changes 4 times a year, just with ingredients we can forage from the fields and the forests nearby, nothing shipped in from the other side of the world. So it's really eco-friendly and sustainable. And then my favourite statistic was that the most private jets arriving at the airport in Copenhagen were just to go to the restaurant.
That's fascinating.
I just can't find the source of that reference. I know I've read it, but you think how ironic that the real challenge there about that sort of sustainable luxury, and who cares, in fact, what you're eating if you've flown there by private plane. That's the thing you should focus on.
That's just the world all over, though, isn't it? That's the perfect sort of analogy for it all. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We have a couple of outro questions, which I'm going to have to ask you. What most concerns you about the world we're leaving the kids?
Well, since I don't have any kids, I'm able to sidestep that question a bit. I do despair of digital distractions, and so obviously questions about sustainability are sort of centre stage with all the food and drink work, but then about just the technology and its sort of detrimental impact on. I never had a mobile phone.
Seriously?
Partly kind of experiment on the evils. Back in the day, I was going to do research on the microwaves and telephones rot your brain. That was a big thing 25 years ago when they first came in.
But they do.
Probably. If not that way, they rot your attention.
But it says aside from the fact that clearly it destroys your brain attention-wise, like if you look at like the instruction manual for the iPhone, which no one does, you're meant to hold it 3 centimeters away from your ear. That's the FDA approval, or not the FDA, the whatever the approval body is.
disillusion of digital distraction.
I think we're entering a more conscious era with all of that. I think it's just gone so obviously too far, and what I hope is that actually we'll be able to augment technology into life, where technology delivers context in a more like less invasive way. If you had to give it a job tomorrow, what would you do?
I think off to the retire to the garden. I think and just you're right there, and I think remain curious about having fun, and but a bit more time in the garden, and more writing of less experiments and more just, as I'm starting to do anyway, kind of writing more about the history of the senses and histories of the pineapples and stuff, and this sort of how our senses worked centuries, millennia ago. And I'm doing a whole series now about herbs and spices. I just finished Galangal this last week. And
what's the thing that you're really excited about in the next couple of years, other than retiring and not having to teach?
I'm a bit curious about AI, of course, but and the way that can interact with sort of culinary creativity, not in terms of AI recipe creators or flavour pairing, but using as a tool, as I see some chefs using, to kind of develop concepts of a dish visually to present to clients, and then figure out how to deliver it physically. Something that space is quite fun, I think, and keep going. We haven't got the perfect magical dish yet. We haven't got the flavour changing dish, but these extraordinary things will keep us challenged.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a real joy.
Pleasure.
And very educational.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been What the Lux. You can find us on socials at Matchreform, and drop us any questions or comments on Twitter using the hashtag #WhatTheLux. Or if you're a luxury brand looking for strategy and design that goes beyond the banal, get in touch via hello@matchreform.com and chat to one of our consultants.